Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm JC SURIS, and I'm accompanied by my colleague YARA BARRENSE-DIAS, who is going to introduce herself in a moment. And we will be discussing about a positive approach to screen use by youth. And it's going to be a workshop, not very much interactive, but we'll try to have you work a little bit. And I think that the best thing you can do is stay with us until the end. We have a huge surprise for you at the end. Okay, so Yara, you're on.
Good morning, everyone. So as Joan Carlos said, my name is YARA BARRENSE-DIAS. I'm a research manager in the research group on adolescent health in Lausanne, in Switzerland. And just to begin, to share the screen, sorry. Here we go, okay. We are going to ask you to work a little bit. Okay, so please go to our research group's website, so www.lesados.ch, and on the home page, on the very first post, you will find a link to participate to a questionnaire. So it's a very short and anonymous questionnaire. So we give you a few minutes to fill in, and then we will use your answers during the presentation. So please fill in it, and thank you very much. Okay, so if you were not there when I explain this, please go to our website, www.lesados.ch, and on the home page, the very first post you will see a link for a questionnaire, a very short questionnaire, so 10 questions and anonymous questionnaire. And then we will use your answers to this questionnaire for the presentation. So please fill in it, and then we will continue the workshop. Si tu regardes, ah non, je peux pas.
Ah. Rien, c'est bon. Le truc sur la créativité, c'est toi qui l'as fait.
La vidéo?
Oui.
Je peux l'introduire, oui. Par contre, il faut juste que je mette là. I'm going to stop the sharing because I have to show you a short video, and I think I have to share the sound of my computer. So just a few minutes. Je ne sais pas où c'est sur cet écran-là.
Qu'est-ce qu'il te faut?
Il faut que... Ah, voilà. Ça ne marche pas. Ça ne marche pas.
Qu'est-ce qu'il te faut?
Là, il devrait y avoir des paramètres.
Fais sur le terme. Fais depuis le terme.
Ah, attends. Okay, so sorry for the technical issues. So I'm going to show you, and I hope that you will hear the sound of the computer. A short video on, it was an advertisement using by a tomato sauce. So it's quite out of the subject, but it's very interesting and quite funny because you will see screen use, internet use, and family time, and how to manage the screen use by use. So I hope it works. So just stop the sharing because my mistake, I shared the wrong screen. So stop sharing. And this one. Okay. Fine, it's okay. Okay, so I don't know if you had the sound of the video, but the story, they hid a mechanism in the paper mill to stop the Wi-Fi and allows the child to look up and realize that something has changed around him or around her. And it was a child. They use a child as a trapped person, but I think you could also use an adult. If you take the train or take the subway and just look around you, you will find that most adults have their eyes focused on their electronic device. So this video is with a child, but I think you could also use an adult as a trapped person. So JC is going to do some mathematics with you.
Hi there. I want you to do a short mathematical exercise with me. It's very easy. I'm not very good at mathematics and I can do it, so you can do it too. Okay, so just think about the situation here. Go back to year 2000, so that's 20 years ago. And back in 2000, just think how many screens you had at home, okay? Including computers, televisions, tablets, whatever. Just count how many screens you had at home, and then just divide the number of screens you had at home by the number of persons living in the house, okay? So back in 2000, 20 years ago, how many screens you had at home and how many people, and you just divide. And you should have, your answer should be among these options: none, 1 per person, 2 per person, 3 per person, or 4 or more per person. So let me tell you, in my case, in 2000, we had our 2 children who lived in the house still. So we had 1 television. A second television that was not very good was an old one, but they used for their Nintendo 64 game box. We had 1 family computer, and that was it. So if we divide the 3 screens by 4 persons, it was less than 1 per person 20 years ago. Okay, that's probably what you will find in your case. Now, if we continue and we go to back to today, to December 5, 2020, do the same exercise. You know, count how many screens you have at home and divide the number of screens by the number of persons living in the house. And again, if we get to the possible answers, well, in my case, the kids left home some time ago, so it's just my wife and me, and we have 2 TVs, plus 1 tablet, plus 2 smartphones, and I'm not counting those for work. And on top of that, we have 3 computers. So that makes 8 divided by 2. We're in option E, 4 or more per person. So that means that in 20 years, the number of screens, or the way to connect that we have, has changed enormously. And this poses some kind of a dilemma regarding our children. The dilemma comes because on the one side, you know, we need to have them be knowledgeable of digital technology, you know, because this is the future, and it's going to be there for a long time, and that's what they need to use, and that's what they will need to use for their studies, for their job, and all that. And on the other side of the dilemma is that, you know, from a public health point of view, we advocate for a minimal use of digital technology by young children, and because we think that it can have negative effects on their physical, cognitive, emotional, and social health and development. So what should we do between the 2 of them? Let me show you a few data that we have been collecting. This first one comes from the last HBSC survey from 2018. This is I'm going to show you the mean for the 40-something countries for 11, 13, and 15-year-olds. When you look at intensive electronic media use, you see that for girls, it increases with age notably, from 28% at age 11 to almost half of them, 46% at age 15. When you look at what happens with boys, it's a little bit lower. It starts almost at the same level at age 11, 27%, but 4 years later, there is a 10-point difference with girls. They are at 36%. When you go a little bit further and you look at problematic electronic media use, girls almost double in 4 years, from 6 to 10%, and boys, it stays relatively stable. It goes from 5 to 7, and it stays at 7 afterwards. Okay, so there seems to be more problems with girls than with boys. Last academic year, we did, and that was right before the pandemic, we did a study among 13 and 14-year-olds in school in Switzerland about their screen use. And this is what we found. We found that there were very few, 0.4%, that had no screen use at all, and I would be very interested to study those kids. But the important thing is that almost 3 out of 4 spend more than 2 hours per day in front of a screen. And we will be discussing about that later on, but that challenges the idea that they shouldn't spend more than 2 hours. Okay, so we have this difference that most of them spend time on their computer, a lot of time on their computer. The other thing is that when we ask them, do you think that your screen time is average, above average, or below average? Well, there's about 1/3 of them who recognize that they spend too much time in front of their computer. And I think that that's a good thing, because they start to feel, even at age 13, 14, that maybe they should be spending less time in front of their computer. There's a research that was published 2 years ago in Pew Research Center in the US, where they found that 95% of teens have access to a smartphone, and 45% say they are online almost constantly. And when you look at the results compared to 2014, 2015, you see that in 3-4 years, it has almost doubled those who said that they are constantly or almost constantly online. We looked at similar results here in Switzerland. This is the MIKE study with among kids from 6 to 13 years of age. And you see that even at this young age, 48% of them have a mobile phone. That's almost half of them. And at age 12 or 13 is 82%. 1/3 of them have a tablet. 5% have a TV in their bedroom. When we look basically at the same information on older kids still in Switzerland, and that's the JAMES study among 12 to 19-year-olds, all of them have a mobile phone, 99%. Still 1/3 have a tablet, and 1 in 4 have their own TV. So most kids have all the necessary elements to be connected to a screen almost 24 hours, 7 days a week. Back to the study that we did last year, these are the activities that outside the screen use that 13, 14-year-olds do during their spare time on school days. This is what they do. The thing they do the most often is spending family time. And, you know, at age 13, 14, that's a little bit what you would be expecting. Unfortunately, what they do less or the least is reading a book. So if you are to do a living on writing books, maybe it's not the best business in town right away. Okay, but there are very few who are reading a book. The other interesting thing is that gaming is not something that they do very often outside their time. When we compare boys and girls, so it's the same study, it's the same results, just comparing by gender, boys in green and girls in yellow, you can see that there are some differences. For boys, the main activity is watching videos, and for girls, the main activity is listening to music. Okay, spending time with family, it's still important, especially among girls, a little bit less among boys, and unfortunately, fortunately, gaming is something that, whether it's online or not, it's most frequent among boys than among girls. We've known that since the very beginning of internet use. And again, reading books is something that is becoming a rarity. However, there are positive effects and positive advantages of using screens and the internet. And let me show you a few examples. This is again from the Pew Research Center, that there was among young people about 1/3 of them who had said that the effects were mostly positive, and especially connecting with friends and family. Okay, after it came, well, easier to find news or information, meeting others, self-expression, and so on. And there were more kids saying it's mostly positive, 1/3, than mostly negative, which was about 1/5. Okay, and the main problem for those who consider it negative was basically bullying or rumor spreading. Okay, the others were very low. So there are good sides to it. And we asked that to our group of young people aged 13, 14. We said, well, what are the main positive points of internet? And they could choose 3 of them. And you see again, boys always in green, girls always in yellow. And you see that for boys, what they mostly appreciate is the quick access to information, that they can get any information in a very short time. For girls, it's communication with friends. And we know that nowadays girls are more connected or more time connected than boys, basically because of social networking. Information on health is the least one. So they don't think that getting information about their health is something they are interested in. We also looked, it's not on the graph, but we also looking at information on sexuality. It was even lower, so we didn't even put it in there. Okay, so girls, it's communication with friends. Boys, quick information access, and information on health is something that is not very interesting for neither of them. We did the same exercise, but then we compare the teens with their parents. Okay, teens are in blue, parents are in green, and there are some interesting differences. For parents, quick access to information is the most important by far. Okay, 85% of the cases. For kids, it's communication with friends, which is not very important for parents, if you can see. Okay, very little importance for parents, about 25%, but more than 50% for kids. Again, both for parents and for teenagers, information on health is the lowest one. And as expected, there was no parent who said that access to porn was an advantage for them. Okay, but that was something expected because we knew that parents would never say that was something important for them. Okay, so there are many things that can be done about that are positive on screen use, and one of them is creativity. And I'm gonna pass it to Yara to explain you that.
So it's a short video to show you how screen and internet can be used to be creative. So I hope technical issues are fine now. So So I don't know if you had the sound. I think, I don't know, I can share the sound of my computer, but I don't see it, but sorry for that. Maybe, yeah, it's a short video to show you how you can use internet to be creative. So you have a lot of different, you have an orchestra man, you have a musician, you have a sport, and they put all the sound together, and they did a kind of song using only the internet and the screen. So it's an advantage, it's a positive thing with internet. I think internet can improve the creativity in some points. So to continue with data, I'm going to show you a few data on social networks. So such social networks is a field that has interested the researcher and the prevention and education field, because it's a new way of communicate, and it's especially used by teenagers. And in the study that we conducted among 13, 14-year-old pupils in Switzerland, we asked participants to give us the social networks on which they were registered, or the social networks they used. And as you can see, the number one is Instagram, following by Snapchat, and far away you have TikTok and other social networks. So if a few years ago, Facebook was the #1. You can see that we have a big change in terms of social networks. I think one of the reasons is because adults and especially parents begin to use Facebook, and so adolescents went to other social networks, and there was a huge development of different social networks using more videos and images, for example, Instagram and Snapchat. And I think maybe you heard about it, but during the pandemic and during the lockdown, TikTok was very famous among adolescents. So maybe if we do again this study, we will have other rates regarding TikTok, and maybe we will have other or additional social networks. For example, during the containment, you have a lot of applications for group discussion or gaming during the lockdown. So as you can see also, we have 4% of teenagers age 14 who said, I have non-social network. And as you can see, we have a gender difference, with boys being more likely to report non-social networks. You have also gender difference in the use of the different social networks. As Joan Carlos presented to you, in this study, we also had the opportunity to interview some parents of pupils, and we asked parents to give us their perception of the social networks using by their children. And so we asked them if they knew on which social networks their child was. And if we obtained the same ranking, so the #1 is Instagram, following by Snapchat, you see that we have a difference in terms of having non-social networks. So maybe we have a different perception. Maybe parents are not so aware of social networks that their children used, but maybe it's larger. You maybe have no idea on what your child is doing on his or her screen or with the internet. So it's a huge difference for the fact of having non-social network. So these results allow me to move to the parents' role. So you have this illustration of a father who said to his son, your mother and I found out you've been blogging. We don't know what that means, but we'd like you to stop. So it's very interesting when we do studies or we do intervention or conferences, many parents say, I want to do something. I want to manage and monitor the screen use of my child, but I don't know how to do. I do not feel at ease with technology. And there is a kind of generational gap between parents and adolescents. And in a study, one of the conclusions was that media education starts at home. So, for example, the parents will offer a smartphone to their child. So the media education will start at home. But many parents in this study wish to be supported, especially by schools. So they need external help, external support. And in Switzerland, so it's quite recent, so maybe we will have a view in few years, but media education is now part of the scholar program, of the school curriculum. So in each lesson, for example, the French class or the mathematics class, you will have the integration of media. So we have to be aware that maybe there is a need for a strong partnership between schools and parents to manage the screen use and be able to manage internet and screen use among adolescents. So when you are parents, you have the aim to manage and monitor and have some strategies for the screen use of your child, but On the other side, you have your own use of the smartphone. For example, in this paper published in the JAMA Pediatrics, you have this conclusion: when parents are engaging their smartphones, they talk less to their children, respond slower to the beats for intention, overreact in response to these interruptions, etc. So you have the behavior of the parents, and parents are a model for their child. So maybe step back to your own relationships with electronic devices and technology when you want to manage the screen use and the internet use of the child. So in this paper, they give some recommendations for parents. And as I've just said, first step back and think about your own relationships with your phone, and especially the points that stress you out the most when you use smartphone, electronic devices. So you are connected 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So think about these points to include them and to discuss these points with your child. Remember that children watch and copy the parents. So you are a model, and sometimes you can have some contradictions in the rules that you want to set up in your home. And resist the urge to photograph, document, and post everything, and just be in the moment. And I don't know if you remember, but a few years ago there was a case of a teenager, so a case which was released in the press, and she was prosecuted, her parents, because they posted a photography of her and she didn't consent for this photography. So it turns out then that it was a fake news, but it allows us to think about this issue and this reality. And the more parents demonstrate this type of tech-life balance, the more our children will learn to do the same. And I'm going to show you a quotation from a study that we conducted in 2017 among parental strategies to monitor and to manage the screen use of their children. And you have this girl who talked about his father, and she said, in fact, for him, it's simple. He said he's against technology, the internet, video games, etc. But he is on his smartphone all the time. So we don't really know what he thinks about it. So as I said, it's kind of a contradiction. So you're against technology, but you use your smartphone during the dinner or at the dinner table. You use your smartphone during family activities, but I am a 40-year-old adolescent and I don't have the right to have my smartphone at the dinner table. So it's kind of contradiction. I would like to show you a video, but I don't know if the sound is working. So it's a little bit complicated because it's a video on the kids' thoughts on their parents' mobile phone use. So it's quite interesting to see how they perceived this as a kid. I would try once again, but here. So, je sais pas comment faire. Là, tu vois quoi?
Je vois rien, ne bougez pas. Ah,
là, tu vois mon écran, tu vois pas le bon écran.
J'entends.
Ok. Donc, si je fais comme ça, là, c'est bon.
No.
Non, ils voient ça. Ça, je comprends. So I will continue with some other recommendations for families and especially for parents. So in another paper, they say that, and there is a huge trend in the literature, in the scientific literature, on the association between screen use, internet use, and physical activity, and also sleep habits. So one of the recommendations is promote that children and adolescents get the recommended amount of daily physical activity in adequate sleep. So you also have the study on the blue light for the sleep and screen use. Another recommendation, and you will see that we obtained some data that show that it's a little bit more complicated, but they recommend that children not sleep with devices in their bedrooms and avoid exposure to devices or screens for 1 hour before bedtime. So because of the blue light. Discourage entertainment media and so screen use and smartphone use while doing homework. And as I said previously, in Switzerland, media education, so media in general, are integrated in the school program. So it could be a little bit difficult to say to the child that you don't have to use internet while doing homework, but at school we said use internet to do your homework. So it's a little bit complicated. And the last recommendation, and designed media-free times together. So for example, family dinner and media-free locations in homes. And as I said, in the study that we conducted among 14 pupils in Switzerland, in the French part of Switzerland, we asked a few questions to pupils, to the participants, on their smartphone use. And just remember the recommendation that children not sleep with devices in their bedrooms. And we asked participants to give us the place where the smartphone was during night. And as you can see, more than a half, so 53% said I'm sleeping, the smartphone is in my bedroom, but furthermore, I'm sleeping next to it. So just to the nightstand right next to me. Half of the sample said I switched off during the night, but the other half said it's it's switched on. And you have almost 1/3 of the participants who say that I woke up to look at it during the night, so to see if I had notifications, if I had notifications on the applications or a message, etc. And as you can see, the fact of having the smartphone while doing homework, you have 75, almost 75% of our sample who said that my smartphone is just next to me when I'm doing my homework. And I think that the integration of media in the scholar program is one of the reasons why 75% of adolescents say that the smartphone is just next to them during homework. For the parental consent, what is very interesting is that in the qualitative study that we conducted in 2017, we asked parents about their family strategies to manage, monitor screen use in their homes. And the rules that we discussed was only on screen time. So you find one relevant finding is that rules regarding problematic content were never mentioned, while rules about screen time were numerous. So this might indicate that parents are more worried about the time spent in front of the screen than about the actual activities that children engage in. And we confirmed this result with the quantitative study among the 13, 14-year-old pupils about the parental concern. We asked parents to give us their main concerns about internet and screen use, and the number one for more than a half of the parents said time spent online or using numeric device, following by cyberbullying, and far away you have talking to strangers, and then other concern about the activity and the content that the child that the child saw in the electronic device went far away after. And there is a recent publication in 2020, so quite recent, that was interested in the association between mental health and screen time. And the conclusion was that time spent on the internet doesn't appear to be strongly linked to children's life satisfaction and mental health. And they ask for improving the quality of children's close relationships, because it's a more fruitful intervention than the restricting their time online. So you see that the main parental concern is time spent in front of a screen, but it's not the main point, and it's not the main issue regarding screen use among adolescents. There is a study in America named Stress in America, and they ask participants to give some management monitoring strategies regarding electronic and technology use. And as you can see, the rates are pretty low. So 28% report that they don't allow cell phones at the dinner table. And 19 don't allow devices during time with friends, and 21 during family time. So the rates are quite low regarding rules that are used by parents to manage technology use. However, the study found that 72% of parents somewhat or strongly agree that they are a model for their children regarding technology use. But when we are looking more in details the findings of this study, you can see that more than 1/3 of employed parents say they check work email often or constantly on non-work days, and on days off, also the majority of parents also often or constantly, so often or constantly, I repeat, check personal email, text messages, and social media. So most of them think that they are a model for their child, and they have healthy relationships with their smartphone and the technology. But when you see the rate is quite high to see that they are often or constantly connected to the technology. In the conclusion, they also found that even if most parents say that I have healthy relationships with technology and I'm a good model for my child regarding screen and internet use, you see that regulating their child's screen time is a constant battle. And I'm going to show you some quotation surrounding this constant battle. So it's from the qualitative study on family strategies to monitor screen use, internet use among the child. And you see this girl, age 12, saying, my mother often tells me that she finds that I spend too much time on the internet. So sometimes I try to manage, but after I have a friend who calls me and then we start to play and then I can't stop. So you see that she's trying to manage, but there is so many temptations, and the mother often tells me that she spent too much time on the internet. So this is a constant battle or a kind of a fight between the child and the mother. And you have the boy, 15-year-old. Also, you have this difference maybe of perception, and maybe it's there is a gap between the individual perception and the perception of the others when using your smartphone. But for my mother, I spend 24 hours a day on my phone, but it depends on the day. Sometimes I go online for 30 minutes and then I turn it off. And for her, I have already spent 3 hours on it. So it's a battle and a topic for fighting for a fight between parents and the child. And you see that these two quotations, and I'm referring to the parental concerns, but focus on time spent again in front of the screen and not on the activity.
Hi there, I'm back, and we'll be talking about what the pediatrician could be doing in those cases, and then I'll answer one of the questions that we have been asked. What's the pediatrician role in all that story? Well, pediatricians and all the other health providers around children, whether it's psychologists or even educators or school teachers and so on, are ideally placed to help families more successfully navigate through this rapid evolving digital world. And many scientific societies have their position papers, their recommendations and so on. I brought you a few ones. For example, the Canadian Society of Pediatrics indicates in its position paper that parents seek advice about their children's screen time in 4 main areas. The first one, and this is the question as pediatricians we always get, is how much is too much? What would be the duration of time that they should spend in front of a screen? And I'll come back to that later, because the limit that you see in research, basically, which is 2 hours, probably is not good anymore. But I'll come back to that later. Second question that they ask most often is, how do I set limits? Okay, how do I say this is what you can do and this is what you cannot do? And again, I'll come back with very practical approaches later on. But I always tell parents that the advantages of Wi-Fi is that you can cut it off. Just cut it off your Wi-Fi, and then there is no less screen options with your children. And I had this mother who said, I cannot do that. I said, why? She said, well, because my husband likes to surf at night. So it's again, what's the model excuse me, that you're giving to your children? The third question that they ask, if that is, what would be the effects on health and well-being? Will that be an effect? And again, we come to the first slides of the session, and whether the dilemma on the one side that they have to prove that they know how to manage all these instruments. On the other side, we don't want them to use them too much. So what's the effect? And finally, and this links a little bit with what Yara was excuse me, saying, it's what's the optimal content. Very often we are very much concentrated on the time they spend, but what do they do on the net? What do they do in front of their screen? The Canadian Society of Pediatrics has given some recommendations. I think they call it the 4M. The first M is for minimize screen time. And that's a very good recommendation, but how do you minimize screen time? What does minimize mean? It means no screen time at all, less than an hour, less than 4 hours. What does it mean? It says the second M is for mitigate or reduce the risk associated with screen time. And again, we need to define what the risks associated with screen time are. Many kids spend time in front of the screen, but do a lot of other things on the side too, especially physical activity. So, you know, you can mitigate, but we should define what the risks associated to it are. As a family, be mindful about the use of screen time. And again, this is not the child problem, but often is more of a family problem. And the fourth M is for model. Adults should model healthy screen use. And we just got a question on the chat about what do you do, you know, when the parents, both parents are on the screens all the time. And I think that you can take the screens out of them, but they'll get a severage syndrome probably. The other day I was in a bus in Lausanne, and that mother came in with a little baby, and she was on the phone. She wasn't taking no attention to the baby. The baby started to cry, and he was crying louder and louder. And at a certain moment, she took off her pocket another smartphone and gave it to the baby so that he was quiet. This is not the solution. Okay, so we have to be good models for their children if we want them to use screens correctly. If we move to France, the group of general pets of the French Society of Pediatrics has some recommendations too. The first one is understand for parents the development of screens without demonizing them. And it's true that the difference between parents and children is getting now narrower, because we start to have generation of parents who are already who know very well how screens work, because they are natives of the digital era. But until now, many parents, when they have a problem with their computer, with their tablet, with their smartphone, who do they call for help? Well, their children. Okay, so sometimes there are things that we don't understand, but that we think they are bad for them. So we have to try to understand how screens work without demonizing them. A good solution is to use screens in collective living spaces. Those of you who have a certain age will remember that the first computers that we had on the internet at home were in the living room. Okay, it was a huge computer in the living room for one simple reason, is that it had to be close to a telephone plug. Okay, and the telephone plug usually was in the living room. So we had everything in the living room. We had to plug it to the telephone line, and that's how it worked. And, you know, it was like a tennis court. You almost had to say, well, from 5 to 6, it's me who is using it. From 6 to 6:30 is the next one, and so on. Okay, so using it in collective living spaces is an easy thing and a better way, a little bit, to control the content of what your children are looking at. Have time without any screen. Okay? And I think that this is important. You'll see it afterwards when Yara presents the results we have with parents during confinement due to the pandemic. But very often we have the feeling that those kids are in front of screens because they don't have a better option. And when you give them better options, they follow. So plan time, family time, especially without any screen. Parents are lost very often about the screen, so you have to help them and to accompany them and let them know that there are things that their kids maybe shouldn't be doing. But again, the model is very important. So there are some games or some online games that are not very good for young people. So tell them, explain to them that they should look at when they buy a game for the kids, that what age is recommended and all those things. And probably the most risk position is the social isolation that some of those kids have. So try to prevent and make sure when you do your anamnesis with the kid that they do other things, that they meet their friends live, or that they have friends, and that then they are not in front of the screen because there's nobody around they can play or they can have fun with. The American Academy of Pediatrics also gave some recommendations. And it's to work with families and schools to promote understanding of the benefits and risk of media. And I think that this is important. Parents and schools need to go in the same line, in the same direction. If school says something and the parents decide to say something else, the kids will take the middle road. So work with schools and make sure that the message the teacher of the children is giving is the same that you are giving, and talk about the benefits and not only about the risks of media use. Promote adherence to guidelines for adequate physical activity and sleep, and that means that a little bit like the French said, well, take time out of screens. That will be time for sport activity, and don't have the screens in the room of the child so that they can sleep enough time or enough hours. Advocate for and promote information and training in media literacy. I think that parents need that. We all need that to be more literate in how media work, and in order not to demonize it, and on the other side, in order to find what the benefits of it could be. So make sure that you are, the parents are as up to date as possible on media literacy. And be aware of tools to screen for sexting, cyberbullying, problematic internet use, and internet gaming disorder. Yara will be talking about screen tools, but many look basically at the time they spend in front of it, and not so much about the time what they do when they are on screen. One of the things that we thought about when back in 2012 we did our first internet survey among young people here in Switzerland is whether the limit of 2 hours was correct. And when you look at the literature, you see that everybody decides that more than 2 hours is a risk, and we don't really know why. When you see why they choose the 2 hours limit, it's because somebody else did that. So if you do some archaeology and you go back in the literature, who said that? Well, it all started in 2001 with the American Academy of Pediatrics. And they said that no more than 2 hours of screen, and they were talking about television, per day for children 2 years or older. Okay, so that was 20 years ago, and it was for television. In 2013, there we reviewed this recommendation to include other media and internet, but again, no more than 2 hours of screen per day for children 2 years or older. And in fact, there is no scientific evidence that 2 hours of screen is a good limit. You have a little bit the feeling that somebody decided, well, 2 hours would be a good place, a good cutoff, and that's what it was decided, a little bit like the weather today. So what happens with those 2 hours? Let me show you first something that comes from the prevention here in Switzerland. They say, knowing how to use media is just as important as learning to read, write, and calculate. Media education and the use of MITIC, MITIC is the acronym for Media, Images, Technologies, Information, and Communication, is therefore now part of the tasks that school must fulfill. That's what the school program here in Switzerland is saying. This means that teachers and school administrators must actively consider the question, how to use MITIC effectively in the classroom, and what possibilities do these tools offer? How to adapt the role of the teacher accordingly, And answering these questions help integrate digital media in education. Okay, so we never talk about the 2 hours here. We did a study about that with our colleague André Berchtold, and he came to the conclusion that, well, 2 hours was not a good cutoff. What we found is that significant effects on health seem to appear beyond 4 hours per day. And those were data from 2012. So probably nowadays it's changing also. So having less time in front of a screen may be beneficial, but spending more than 2 hours until 4 hours doesn't seem to see any difference. Some recommendations that you can find a little bit from everywhere. I brought you some official recommendations that are from different countries. Okay, on the cartoon you can read there are 3 ways to make the internet safer for your children: hardware, software, and underwear. But in France, for example, they use the famous 36912 by Serge Tisserand, who is a psychiatrist who has been teaching a lot about how to use screens with your children. And the idea of Tisserand is basically that before age 3, you play with your kid, but you use no screens. From 3 to 6, you start setting the rules about the screen time. From 6 to 9, you keep setting the rules with him, and you sit with him or with her to see what he or she is doing. 9 to 12, you start talking with the child about at what age they will have their own iPhone, their own smartphone. And after 12, you indicate that there are schedules to be respected. This approach is relatively simple. The problem is that I think it's really for parents who are interested in doing that and who are really good at have a certain level of education. Not everybody can do that at that level. So I'm not very good, very supportive of it, but it's very widely used in the French community. I went to this site, the Very Well Family, where they had 10 strategies to limit your teen's screen time, and they gave ideas for non-screen activities. And that was what we were talking before, to say what can you do instead of being in front of a screen, and that's the ideas they came from. Okay, some things a child can do instead of looking at screen. It would include communicate with parents and siblings, socialize with friends, read books, be creative and use the imagination, play outside, do homework, carry out family chores, and get enough rest. The interesting part of this is that about half of them, you can do them in front of a screen. You can socialize with your friends through the screen, you can read books through the screen, you can be creative with that, and you can also do your homework with that. Okay, so there are many things that it's difficult to find out if you can do it outside or including screens. In Switzerland, we have the 10 golden rules that I like a lot. I think they are pretty easy to use. You see, there's still the 3-6-12 rule from the French, from Serge Tisserand, but there are also things that are very practical, like support is better than prohibition, and TVs, PCs, and gaming consoles should not be kept in the children's room. Children need media competent role models, and so on. It's just 10 quite easy rules that can be very, very easily used and applied for parents. Let me share with you a video, and we hope that it's going to work. We'll have the media expert do that.
Est-ce que maintenant, je vois plus le... Ça, mais j'arrive plus à voir le screen 2. Le grand.
Voilà.
Mais je crois qu'ils voient ça de nouveau.
Non? Ah ouais, bon, c'est bon.
Je vois plus de... Bon, écoute. C'est le screen 2 qui me perturbe. Bon, on va aller comme ça.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby, who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it. They actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
Okay, you see what happens with kids when you pay no attention to them. I was telling you before the story about the parent giving a smartphone to the kid so that he or she would stop crying. A screen is not a pacifier. Okay, and we have to spend time with kids and to do that. I think that one thing that every one of us can do, and that is very easy to do, is whenever in public transportation or in the street or in your consultation, wherever you see a father or a mother who, instead of giving a screen, talks and calms the baby talking to him or talking to her, just congratulate them. Say, what you're doing is very good. I think they need to get some feedback, some positive feedback. Today, until here, we saw the official recommendations. I thought that it would be maybe helpful for you as pediatricians to get some practical recommendations that I usually give to the parents that come desperate. And these are recommendations that are not official and that I've been collecting through a little bit through the years. Okay, so here's the first one, the 50-50 rule. This is all the credit for this idea. It goes to my wife. She had the idea when our children, when we got them their first Nintendo 64, and we had a deal with them. We told them, you can play with the DEM machine, as we call it, the Nintendo, as much time as you read a book. So if you read a book for half an hour, you can play the machine for half an hour. If you read a book for 3 hours, you can play the machine for 3 hours. And we let them manage that. And it went very well. They were very good at that. Sometimes I would stop by and say, haven't you been playing too long? He said, yeah, but yesterday I read a lot. And it was true. And they've both become very much reading young adults. So it's a good option. It can be, you know, as much time as you spend doing house chores or doing physical activity or taking out the dog or whatever you want them to do as an activity, but the 50-50. And sometimes you can even do well 75-25, 60-40, that's up to you. But, you know, they have to do something else if they want to be using their screens. This is an idea that comes from the canton of Geneva here in Switzerland. In schools, they decided that there's 15 minutes where everybody's quiet and they all have to read a book. 15 minutes of reading a day is not enormous, but what is important is that the whole school does that. And all the schools in the primary system in Geneva. And it's a good idea to think that, you know, there are other things that you can do instead of being on your screen. When we did our study here in Lausanne, the parents gave us a lot of ideas. We discussed with them and they gave us very, very, very good ideas. For example, setting rules like where places where you cannot use the screens, where the screens are not allowed. Talk basically about exchange and not, you know, just prohibiting things. Okay, be as much as possible knowledgeable about the technologies. Rapidly use a setting, clear rules, because if you decide to put the rules once the things don't go well, then it goes nowhere, and so on. You can find this fact sheet in our website, so you can go and find it and use it as much as you want. I very often use the calendar method also, especially when the mother says he's or she's on screen all the time, and the child or the young person says, no, that is not true. I say, well, do a calendar about the time you spend on the screen. I brought you an example. I just put it nicely because it was difficult to understand his handwriting, but this is a 13-year-old screen calendar, and that was a few years ago. Okay, so for example, on Wednesday, where they have no school in the afternoons here in Switzerland, he spent from 6 in the afternoon until 11 at night, and he stopped for 20 minutes to eat. Okay, all those that are in bold is because they have school the next day. The days that they have no school, the next day, like Saturday, he started at 10:35 until 2 in the morning. Okay, the good side of the screen calendar is that it gives you a base to discuss with the young person or with the parent. And in this case, the 13-year-old admitted, yeah, maybe I spend too much time in front of a screen and there's something I have to do. Okay. Another method that I learned from an Italian mother is the password method that I read. It's an Italian mother who changed the Wi-Fi password every week. And on Monday morning, she would leave a note on the dining table saying, you know, giving a clue to find the password. And in that case, it was, for example, the password for this week is the color of Anna Karenina's dress. Not the one in the movie, the one in the book. So they had to read a little bit of the book to find out what the color of the dress of Anna Karenina was. Okay, so that could be a good method too. And when you're absolutely desperate, the actress Marion Cotillard gave a very good idea. She said, well, if you feel guilty because your kids are looking at television too long, well, just cut the sound, put on subtitles, and they'll have to read. And it is a way that they have to read. Maybe it's a solution. Okay, but the point is that sometimes we really need to be creative and discuss with parents what is possible for them to do, and especially that they are aware of what's going on with their use. Many of them want their children not to use the screens or the devices, but they use them all the time. Okay, so be aware of that. We're going to be discussing about screen tools now, and I think it's Yara who is coming in. Okay, we see that there are questions coming in. We'll try to discuss them at the end. Okay.
So as I manage the sound of the videos, I think that if we have time, we are going to show you again a second time the video with the sound. I think it's better. So screening tools, I'm going to show you 3 examples of tools to screen a problematic use of internet or smartphone. I insist on the screening tools. It's not to stop a diagnosis of addictive behavior. It's screening, but screening tools can help you in your intervention or doing your practice, because, for example, this paper said smartphones are bad for some teens, not all, and these tools can help you to say, okay, I have to investigate more deeply because the score of the screening tools is positive, and maybe there is some issues regarding the screen use or internet use. And in this paper, there was a kind of petition called for policies based on evidence, not fear. And maybe these screening tools can help to have some evidence to investigate more deeply on these issues. So the first one, and we use these screening tools in our study, it's the internet addiction test. So it's a short version of the internet addiction test. It's 12 questions. And for example, you have, how often do you find yourself saying just a few more minutes when you're online? And participants have to respond on a scales ranging from never to always. And then you have the definition of a problematic internet use with a score greater than 30 out of 60. The second one is the one that we ask you to fill in at the beginning of this session. So it's the smartphone addiction scale. So there was a development and validation of a short version for adolescents, and which was adapted also in Spanish and French. So it's 10 questions, and for example, maybe you remember, but you won't be able to stand not having a smartphone, and you have to respond on a scale ranging from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And the authors of the first article, so Kwon and Al, decided to stop a cutoff with a gender difference. So their arguments was that, okay, the screen use and internet use show differences in terms of gender. So we will have a cutoff of 30 for boys and 32 for girls. So when you have a score higher of 30 or 32, you are considered as having a problematic use of your smartphone. And so I will give you the results of your smartphone addiction scale in few minutes. The third one is the shortest one also. It's also for the problematic internet use. So it's only 3 questions. How often do you feel anxious because you are away from the internet? Do you experience feelings of withdrawal for not using the internet? Or do you lose motivation to do other things because of the internet? And you have a scale also ranging from never to very often. And they say, and I insist to the screening tools, when the score is upper 3, you have to investigate more deeply. We do make some criticism regarding these tools, and we are currently asking few questions about their use, because as Joan Carles presented you in the data that we show you at the beginning of the session, we ask the youth that we interviewed during our study on the internet use and screen use in general, and we ask them to assess their own screen use. And as you can see, we have 34% who said my screen use is excessive. I think it's excessive. And we also used the 2 of the 3 screening tools that I just presented to you. The internet addiction test, we have a result of 11% of our sample who were considered as having a problematic use, and 18% for the smartphone addiction test. And so the question that we are currently asking is that maybe these tools needs an update in 2020. For example, social networks are not part of the screening tools, or very little. And maybe you don't have to focus only on the screening tools, because as you can see, maybe you will miss some issues regarding screen use for adolescents, because for him or for her it's excessive, and maybe you will have some issues on their daily life. And if you only focus on the screening tools, you say, okay, that's fine, the score is not positive, so let's move to another subject. And you see that you have a huge gap between the screening tools and the accurate evaluation of the adolescents. So just to give you an overview of the smartphone addiction test, so we use it in this study. So as you may see, as you could see, 18% were considered as being excessive users for the smartphone. We also had another study among post-mandatory students about gambling, but we also included the smartphone addiction test in the 3rd wave of the longitudinal study. And we found a mean score of 19, and there were 8% to be excessive users. And I have the results of your questionnaire. And just to tell you that you have a mean score of 37. So it's quite a very quite high, and with the cutoff. So I use the cutoff of 13 or 30. We do not ask you, we didn't ask you about your gender, but you were 66% to be considered as an excessive user of the smartphone. So just remember that, just step back on your own use of smartphone and your own relationships with your smartphone. But it's quite interesting. As you saw, our workshop used a positive approach, and so I will show you a few examples of such an approach, how to use screens and the internet in general to have a positive approach, in particular in sex education. And as part of a national study on sexual health and behavior among young adults that we conducted in Switzerland, we performed a study on the sex education resource. So we asked participants to give their main sex education resource during their adolescence. And as you can see, for 8% of them, the main, and so the first sex education resource was the internet. And just to remember that our sample was consisted of young adults aged 24 to 26 in 2018. So they had to remember their adolescence 10 years ago. And I think that the internet for adolescents in 2020 may have a bigger place. So maybe the 8%, it's a little bit conservative. We aim to determine what kind of youth used internet as their first sex education resource. And we found that boys were more likely to use the internet, non-heterosexual youth also, and those who define their puberty out of the norm. So they had a puberty in advance or later on compared to their peers. And so we have to remember that internet can be a resource for some of the youth, and despite of telling do not use internet, we have to integrate internet as a complementary and additional resource and direct maybe use to trusty websites. We also conducted 10 years ago, it's a bit old now, but a qualitative study on sexual dysfunction among adolescents, and we asked them the resource for sexual dysfunction, and the first resource was also the internet. And these boys say, because internet allows me to have a direct access and research on Google, and we have a direct access at any time, whenever we want. And we confirmed this in 2018 with the National Study on Sexual Health and Behavior. 78% of young adults say, I used internet for information on sexual troubles. So when I have sexual dysfunction, sexual problems, used internet. But it's very interesting to see that most of them consider that this help was helpful just a little or not helpful at all. So in terms of sex education, we have to consider a holistic sex education in terms of topics, but also in terms of resources. And the internet has to be integrated in these resources. And I show you an example. In Switzerland, we have a website named chow.ch. Is a website for young people age 11 to 20, and on this website you have a lot of information and resources on sexuality, on mental health, on gambling, on gaming, etc. And you also have a question and answers section where young people can ask questions, and health professionals or prevention professionals answer them. And so you have all the questions and the responses of the professionals. So here is an example of a positive approach of the screen of the internet. A second example, I was part of a prevention project in Switzerland here, named Youth and Media, and the basic constatation was that children are in front of a screen from an early age, and maybe we can use screen and everyday situations using a screen as icebreaker for positive approach for sex education. And to help these parents to talk about sexuality and the association with screen and technology, we produced 4 sheets presenting typical situation, and we gave information and recommendation on these situations. These sheets were written in what we called easy to read and understand language. So we aim to target all parents, including foreign parents or those with specific needs or disabilities. So very easy to understand information. So here is the example. So on the left, so it's in French, but on the left you have the sheet. So on one side you have a picture, and on the other side you have the text. And so this one is for sexting. And so we have a positive approach, because we do not say, okay, it's dangerous, you don't have to do this, or call the police, but we explain to the parents, why does your child want to send such an image of her or himself, and we gave some information about that, and what can you say to your child. You have to agree, some consent issues, and all the sexting that goes wrong when someone decided to disseminate the image, etc., etc. So it's an example, or another example, how we can use screen and internet, and having a positive approach, and integrate screen and internet as a complementary resource. So what about the COVID-19? So this picture is I think is very relevant, because the school at home needs a screen, need internet, and so I think we have quite a change in the way that we use technology during this period. In our study among 13, 14-year-old pupils, we already said, but we had the opportunity to interview also the parents, and we had the huge opportunity to have a pre-COVID and a during COVID, because we asked parents that who participate to the first study to participate again with adapted questions on media use during the pandemic. And so unfortunately we didn't have the opportunity to do this with pupils, but we have the parents, and we asked them about the positive points of the internet, so the advantages. And what we found is that compared to the before COVID, and shopping online and communication with family had higher rates of positive has positive points for parents. And it was not what we expected, but there was a decrease in the communication with friends. But then we found that yes, it's the main issue for adolescents, but not for parents, but the communication with friends. And the quick access to information also decreased in terms of positive points. And I think it's because during this period we had so much information on COVID-19, and we only heard about it 7 days a week. It could explain this drop. A large majority of parents reported that during the containment, screen rules have changed. And you can see most of them a little, a lot, and completely. When we ask them, okay, they change in which way, most of them, and a huge majority of them say the rules were less severe during containment. And currently, we conducted a qualitative study using interviews method with adolescents and parents to collect data on experience of the pandemic and containment. And one of the results is that, yes, we changed our rules regarding screen use because it was a hard time, and because I had no time to see if my child is on his or her screen, etc., etc. And some parents admit that it's now complicated to return to the rules before containment, and it's a current issues regarding screen use. During the containment, the pandemic, some parents reported having tried to define screen spaces and non-screen spaces and non-screen schedules, but mostly they try to encourage off-screen activity. And we had 3 responses. So yes, I tried and I succeed, or yes, I tried but I failed, or no, I didn't try. And as you can see, most of them encourage off-screen activities and succeed in having off-screen activity with their child. Finally, regarding the contentment, just step back on this period and imagine living this without the internet or without a screen, and for social ties also, and screen and internet use was for everybody. We have to do our work at home, school at home. We have I say apéro through Zoom. We had a group discussion through Zoom, through Skype, etc. And I think that this period may highlighted some social inequalities, including the access to the internet and screen and technology in general. For example, during one of my interviews for the qualitative study on the experience of contentment among adolescents and parents, there is a father who say we had only one computer for 5 persons, and the computers was very old, and so it was quite complicated. However, I think that we are also in kind of solidarity situations or period, and I think that technology, internet, allows to have outburst of solidarity. For example, in Switzerland, in France, and also in Italy, they have a hashtag We Upload, and so every evening we from our windows, we upload the health professionals to thank them in this situation. And with Joan Carles, we love this picture because currently we are not in a social distancing, but we are in a physical distancing and in a social solidarity situation. And I think that to have a positive approach for technology helps us in this social solidarity situation. The Pew Research Center, so a very recent data, asked participants to answer about internet use, screen use, and during the pandemic. And as you can see, most of them, and a huge majority of them, say that internet was important, and more than half of them say it was more than important. It was essential during this period. And most Americans say the internet has been mostly a positive thing for them and for society. So you see, the content 90% say personally was a very good thing.
Okay, we're nicely getting to the end of it, but remember, we still have a surprise at the end. But what would be the take-home messages from this morning? Well, you have to find out what is limiting the time of the children versus the need of the time of a screen time of children. And I think that this is something that we must encourage parents to discuss. Okay, not to say 2 hours because that's what the literature says, but what are your needs, and let's see how we can adapt to it if they are reasonable. I think that we need to tell parents and to ask ourselves as adults, what about our own use? Okay, and do we spend time without screens? Can we live without screen? Just ask a very simple question to the adults or the parents. What happens the day that you forget your iPhone at home? How do you live that? How do you go back, even if it's an hour ride to get it, or can you live without it? There's also the time spent on screen and the content. And with most parents we talk to, basically they say that what they're worried is about is the time they spend in front of the screen, and not very much about the content. And I think that the content is as much or maybe more important than the time they spend in front of it. Okay, so it's important to find out what they do on the internet. That's just part of the discussion that parents should have with their children. The practical recommendations, I gave you a few of them. I always ask parents what they do, especially when they say that the time their child spends in front of a screen is not very high. Say, well, what are the options? And I write them down. I think it's good to, you get great ideas from parents. So use them, and especially when you give them recommendations, ask them whether it's something that they feel like doing, because you can give a great recommendation and they might feel that that's impossible to do. So just give recommendations, but work them with the parents. What about screening tools? Yara has discussed about it. I think that the screening tools we have to date are not very good. If you read them, most of them come from addiction, the field of addiction, and mainly from the field of substance addiction. So it's not very good as a screen tool, and very often it's not very good for children, especially, because there are things that adults have sense or make sense for adults, but not always for children. Maybe the easiest thing is to ask them, do you think that you spend too much time? And if they're not sure, ask them to do a calendar and then discuss from it. Internet is here to stay. It's not going to go away. That's very clear, and it has very positive effects. So discuss those positive effects, use it even for adults, and see with your children or with your patients what are the things that they should be using internet for. And use screens as a complementary resource. It has not to be the center of your life, but it's something that can be very helpful. And this is something that the people need to know, and the parents need to know. Okay, so with all that, we thank you for listening up to here, and you have our webpage down at the bottom of this slide that you can take a look at if you have the time. Now, yeah, just a second. Yara has something to do. I have to answer one of the questions we got up here, and this was that where to get information about the latest social network use among young people. Sincerely, I don't know. It depends a lot on each country. For me, the best source of information is the young people themselves. I ask them, what are you on? What do you do? What is the game that your friends play the most? What is the social network that you use basically, and so on? And I think that's the best thing to do. And ask parents to what they do and what is the model they give. I pass you back to Yara again.
So I'm going to show you a second time the very first video with the sound. I think it's better. Where are you? Okay. So this.
In this experiment, we're going to test just how absorbed these kids are with their devices. I'm talking about that kid, those kids there, that kid, and definitely him. And, well, not her, she's his mum. So we're going to swap things about a bit. Flowers first. That's a safe starting point. A family photo here is exchanged for a rubbish painting right behind him. He still hasn't noticed. Over to the other house now. Who's coming in here? Well, it's a Viking. And he puts a picture of a zebra on the wall. Now this is a classic mum swap. Look at this, look at this. Lovely. Here's another one. Smashing. How long's she been crouched under there, I wonder? What do you think's going to happen next? Oh, the sister's off. Man comes in with a rubber tree. He doesn't notice any of these things. A new sister's arrived behind the...
We've got the sound without the image this time. So Voilà, non? So. Ah, je crois que là.
Football helmet. This sister has legged it. And here comes a little fella with a tiny tree. Nice. The brother leaves, and in comes a massive new brother. We need something more radical to get this dinner back on track. Let's disconnect the Wi-Fi with the Dolmio pepper hacker. Boom. Hang on. Who's that? Who's that fella? Who are you? Who are these people in my house? Yep, he's seen enough and he's off. I don't blame you, fella. He's off as well. Sensible. Ah, but there you go. Everyone's having a good old chuckle about it. And now, with the help of Dolmio, the family can get around the table and enjoy dinner together. And here's something these kids will never forget. Family time is important. Let's not ruin it with tech. The Dolmio pepper hacker turns tech off and family dinner time on.
Okay. Ouais.
Juste ça.
Pardon?
On enlève juste lui. Voilà.
Non, mais attends. Le voir? Non. Non. Okay. We're going to try to share the screen for the surprise. Hope you like it. Hope it works. Okay, there we go. I 1, 2, and you go. Okay. Comment j'ai pas cher?
On ne voit pas. C'est là, non? Non. Attends, mais voir si là. Mais voir si là. Tu veux pas finalement tu fais. Voilà.
Là, tu vois?
Non.
Caméra. Ouais, c'est bon.
Attention de ça, ouais. Ah, mais t'as pas Michel. Attends. Maintenant, là. Clique là.
Ça va? On n'entend rien en ce moment, c'est bon. Allez, on y va. Ça marche, on voit rien. From JC's dining room, a 1, a 2, and... Là, maintenant? Non? Pourquoi pas? Ok.
Peut-être qu'on arrête le live là et puis on teste.
On arrête le live là?
Ouais, c'est-à-dire
Okay, doesn't seem to work. We'll work on it for the end. Thank you all for being here.